I'd like to introduce today's panel, led by our moderator. There is no title that perfectly described Jared Grates' role, so he invented his own. Jared is an audienceologist that grows audience and revenue even when the radio is off via the audience company. Jared and panel, please take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Henrik, and thank you for attending today. Whether you work in radio, media, music, or were simply bribed with coffee to attend today's session, it isn't about radio as that thing in your car. It's about understanding one of the oldest audience industries on the planet and what it can teach every organization trying to stay relevant in a messy digital world. Radio has had to reinvent itself earlier and more often than most industries. It didn't get the luxury of waiting for disruption. Disruption knocked, let itself in, and ate everything in the fridge. And yet, radio survived. In fact, it's still one of the most trusted mediums on the planet. And today, we're here to explore why, and more importantly, what lessons you can steal as it continues to evolve. We're going to jump between the past, the present, and the future with our panel. And yes, there will be stories. Tommy Goldstad from Radio Player once had an entire country threaten him over switching off FM radio. Con Rasso from Tune Global once built tech so ahead of its time that users literally tried to attach antennas to their TVs. And Jeremy Sinan from Hubbard Radio has a podcasting story that perfectly sums up how fast audience habits can change overnight. Before we get in, we win today if you walk away knowing something that you didn't, and you're now armed with a few practical ideas that you can use tomorrow in any industry with any audience. Okay, let's dive in. And to start off talking about, to get to the future, we actually have to look back to the past for a moment about how we got here. And Tommy, let's start with you, because you're the head of communications at Radio Player now, but in a previous life, you led Norway's FM shutdown. That's right. If you from the US today, you might not know that there's a country on the planet that shut down AM and FM. And Tommy was at the forefront of that. And let's be honest, people weren't exactly sending you flowers at the time. Why don't you tell us that story? And what did that moment teach you about loyalty, habit, and the emotional grip that radio has on people?
Thank you for the introduction, Jerry. Lovely to be here, everyone. Yeah. As Jared just said, Norway is the only country on the planet that's actually gone all digital when it comes to radio, switched off FM and AM, and are now only IP and DAB only. And traveling around, as you said, that's the only time in my life I've been threatened on my life. And that was mainly because people got scared because is the digital shift, is that going to mean that I'm going to lose my radio? They were furious, or most of all, they were maybe just anxious because radio is so close to the heart. It's the media you care the most about. So uh, they were stressed. They thought we were going to take it away from them, and that tells me something about the the strength that radio has within loyalty and the heart of people, the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy, Europe seemed to embrace digital earlier than anyone else. What was the mindset shift that allowed that to happen? And did Europe learn the hard way?
Well, going digitally, every other media channel has the opportunity to in reinvent itself and to go digital, meaning more content, better content. And in a country like Norway, especially, and also throughout Europe, to make that happen, radio needs to deliver more, and FM doesn't really give that opportunity. So that's what it was all about: giving more opportunities, more stations, and a more variety of content, like on the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to delve a little bit more into that technology in a moment, but let's jump back to this side of the Atlantic. Jeremy, the US has had a long golden era of radio dominance, then a very sudden shift with streaming, podcasting, digital. As VP of Digital Strategy at Hubbard Radio, what did that moment feel like inside the industry where all of these new technologies kind of hit radio?
Well, it's funny you call it a moment because it was probably a million moments. I don't know which moment specifically to speak to, but yeah, I mean, I've been leading the digital strategy for media companies since 2000 essentially. And I've seen kind of every little thing come and be a challenge, be an opportunity, and figure out, from a traditional media standpoint, how do we use this? Do we, how do we leverage this to grow, to reach more audience? Um, and so, yeah, I mean, we'll have to probably get into it as we go here, but there's every little thing, I remember when Facebook was new. I remember when apps were new, when the iPhone first came along. Um, you know, SMS, email, websites. I mean, you name it, it's all made an effect on what radio is today and where we're continuing to go.
Yeah. There's a few other challenges the US radio industry in particular has got. I know in terms of regulation, that's a challenge. Ratings is a challenge. Just help us unpack some of those other challenges that a radio station in the US is currently dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to digital, I mean, there's just challenges. We have no shortage of those. They're all over the place. But yeah, I mean, in order for us to evolve in a digital world, we deal with traditional measurement and how we're measured on the traditional side of the business, and then always trying to battle the measurement we see digitally and getting credit for the consumption that we get, online via streams and mobile apps, things like that. How do you then sell it to advertisers, when they're looking at one form of measurement, when there's another? That's always been a challenge, and continues to be. The changing of the car, like Tommy's talking about, like there's as the dashboard evolves, that's definitely has been a challenge, will continue to be an even harder challenge as the dashboard changes to be more digital. Music royalties are a challenge because when people consume us over stream, it's a totally different monetary game than it is for us over the air. Um, so yeah, I mean, moving into digital, from a traditional media standpoint is not for the brave of heart. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of
Mm.
challenges.
Well, despite that, radio has got this amazing ability to remain a trusted voice in this particular era. Con, I want to address this question to you. As the managing director of Tune Global, you've kind of got a foot in both camps. You've got a foot in the radio camp, you've got a foot in the music camp. What can other industries learn from radio's ability to remain trusted and human in a world where everything else is being automated and trust is being eroded?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jared. I mean, from our perspective, we're a technology enabling company when it comes to music. So whether someone is executing broadcast radio or radio in a DSP environment, or they're a DSP themselves, or they're actually trying to create maybe even a radio experience inside of a gaming application, we provide the technology and the music and everything else that goes along with that. So to your point, we then see really interesting, I guess, challenges or even business ideas that come to us where someone's trying to execute something novel in that way. I'm going to say that one of the really interesting things, though, with radio, and even if for our clients that might have DSP executions and aren't radio only, or there may be radio broadcast, but they're trying to extend their digital footprint, and perhaps that's where we fit in. Uh, it is that ability to have personality that connects beyond music. So it creates an opportunity to have something unique as far as content goes that can't be compared to necessarily their competitor in that market. And I think that's where radio really remains strong. It can be, especially if it's live radio or near live radio, you can actually have quite an immediate response to users. And so when we start to think of the current generation being much more of a social generation, right, I think radio can lean into that. I think some of the items that Jeremy went through, especially around how you manage measurement, are challenges that have to be worked through to really enable more opportunities for the connectivity. But I think we'll get deeper into that as we go. So we see radio really being spoken about almost across all the executions that we do, except maybe it's not in its traditional sense. Like I always ask the question, is radio just a series of towers? Or is radio the experience that actually happens, right? That it's a unified experience. I think it's the unified experience that people are looking for. And towers, just like we went through things with vehicles that we started off with, horse and cart, and where we are today, I think that that process will evolve. And maybe that's, Tommy, what you've already spoken about in terms of in your particular landscape of Norway, how that's already moved along pretty significantly.
So I think Con, you've kind of touched on a really important point, and I want to kind of, now that we've got a warm up and everybody's spoken and everybody's got to have a chance to meet you, let's open these questions up to the rest of the panel now, because it is 2025, and let's lean into what you were just saying, Con. What is radio really about when you strip away the transmission technology, and why does radio matter in 2025?
We could spend the entire hour on just how to define radio. There's a lot of debate about this out there. But I think Khan's right. I mean, for my money, radio is not it's not about the signal. It's not about the technology. It's about that shared experience live in the moment. It's audio. I still believe radio is audio, because you can also be, live video is a totally different animal. But I think that's what it is. I think it's live in the moment audio that the masses are consuming, however they consume it. That's how I would define it.
I would
Tommy?
I would add trust as well as a main pillar when it comes to radio. It's yeah, definitely audio. It's about the shared experience. It's local, but most of all, during the times we're in at the moment, a trusted media outlet, even though it's entertainment or news or whatever, it's trusted. I think that's
How does that play in an environment where everyone's got a mobile phone? Some of the streaming platforms, it's what I want to listen to when I want to listen to it. Radio is the traditional linear broadcast platform. How does how does that play in a 2025 world in an on-demand era?
I
I mean,
think
I
there's
think
a lot. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples in even a DSP world of people trying to get closer to the user. And you look at, one of the hot topics at the moment, which is fandom and how fans connect closer to their artists. And I think it's also how fans connect closer to the personalities that are on radio. I think you can substitute the word artist for whatever it may be, right? And I think that's such a hot topic that it isn't just about a lean back experience where I'm consuming music. By the way, I don't always think radio is music. In our core of most of what we do is about music, right? In there. But there's so many other opportunities that have a higher share of voice in the execution, or in some cases, all voice as well. And so it's balancing those items, I think, and giving people choice. So I think radio certainly fits within a broad spectrum of consumption mediums, if you like.
Mm.
I think it's completely unique, and I think it's something that we need to lean into as an industry. Like in an on-demand world, when I could pull up any song I want on YouTube in 3 seconds, when I could pull up any podcast I want in 3 seconds, like in an on-demand world, there's not that same connection as you have when you are consuming something, that other people are consuming the exact same thing at the same time. There's a reason why live sports still dominates. I mean, you could argue the only reason to have a subscription to these live streaming TV accounts is because of live sports for live events. The actual recorded shows are not as important because I can get those whenever, wherever, right? I think that to me that's radio. That's what we need to lean into, and it's that everybody's consuming it at the same time. You can go to work and be like, "Did you hear that this morning? Did you hear that?" Because other people consumed it at the same time you did. And I think that's our unique advantage that we need to really embrace and lean into.
Yeah, I like that. It's the original social media because we all get to consume it together at the same time. So car listening has been one of those things. If you go back 20, 30 years, you had pretty much a 30 split between in-car, at work, and at home. And we've seen across the world that pattern change, and in-car has actually kind of increased compared to the at home and at work. How important is the car in 2025?
Massively.
Yep.
And we see that the development inside the car, it's at a rapid pace, huh? And what used to be, especially in the car, I must say, radio has always been a great audio experience. Now it's a just as much a visual experience as well, and radio needs to deliver on that. Radio, we need to make sure that radio needs to look as good as it's sounding, and it's always sounded great. So we need to embrace those opportunities to make sure that radio and the music that goes along with the radio um, gets the space it deserves in the car. Because for 100 years, cars have had a couple of buttons. It was the heating, it's the whispers, and then it's the radio. It's been that simple. But with today's screens in cars, connected cars, we need to make sure that radio stays attractive, and it does that by making sure it's visual experience, it's seamless user experience, content discovery, podcasts, whatnot, is is a part of the experience.
Mhm. I actually heard a great quote today that the radios in car was so valuable for the car manufacturers they used to make them removable. But we are in 2025, and we should just declare that you work for a company called Radio Player. I'm going to assume that most people on the call don't know what Radio Player is because it's a big thing in Europe, and we've got many attendees from the US today. Tommy, what is Radio Player, just quickly, and how is it solving the future problem for radio in Europe?
So Radio Player is a technology company. It's owned by the broadcasters in Europe. And what we do is we build technology and we forge partnerships with car makers to make sure that radio, as I said, looks good and works seamlessly inside the car, making sure metadata and traditional broadcast and IP streaming kind of just blends for the user for a great user experience. So that's what Radio Player does.
So you're really saying, and the industry in Europe are saying, it's no longer just good enough to be an audio source. It's an opportunity to engage in a different way with some type of interesting visuals, and you would probably go as far as saying that's a necessity. It's not a luxury.
Definitely the necessity. Definitely, because the users expect it as well. They
Mm.
want that visual experience on a different level than radio has been able to provide previously, and that's a change for the industry. But at the same time, a huge opportunity, and also maybe especially for the music industry and everyone working with music and artists, it suddenly becomes, radio has always been the main and the most powerful music discovery engine on the planet. It still is that, but in addition to being the art, the sound and the song itself, it now gives some opportunities for branding of artists and which is massively at scale.
Mm. So radio was transmission, it was broadcast. It's now moved to distribution in different ways. We often confuse more platforms with more opportunities. What is the right way to think about distribution these days?
I think
Hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
no, feel free, Jeremy. I've been talking enough already.
Uh, I mean, word that question again, Jared. What is the right way to think about distribution these days?
Yeah. Yep.
I
How
mean,
should a broadcaster be thinking of it?
it's all critically important. I think most broadcasters would tell you we just want to be everywhere people consume so that we can be consumed. Um, and that, whether that's obviously over the air, whether that's streaming, and however streaming that's coming from your website, mobile app, smart devices like Alexa, Siri, things like that. Um, Podcasts, like on-demand versions of the content that we create. Video, I mean, the lines have completely blurred. Radio is not just audio anymore. We're producing tons of video too. So just, I think the best answer most people would tell you is we just want to be everywhere. And that way, if the consumer, if that's how they consume, then they can find us there. Um, I think the challenge is not every platform is created equal as far as how you can monetize on that platform, what level of control you have on that platform, um, whether you have ownership of that platform. They're all a little bit different. Um, and so, yeah, you want to be everywhere, but you also have to be careful about your strategies around each, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I would say as well, from our perspective, we're often, I guess, leaning into the technology component of it, right? How do we actually provide more technology to enable people here like Tommy and Jeremy to make use of that technology if it's applicable to their markets, right? Um, and, you know, some of those areas, for argument's sake, is we've been experimenting with a new product called social radio, which really enables, it's a digital product or a hybrid product, but it enables either DJs or personalities, artists, or really it could be actually the actual consumers of radio themselves to generate what we would call micro stations, right? So they've actually got a listening audience in there. And the beauty of it is that it's a two-way communication street. So the listeners can actually communicate with the person broadcasting in real time, and that person can use a lot of effects and other fun things to actually create something that's really interesting. And that sort of, from our perspective, is how do you actually bring radio to a TikTok generation? How do you get the concept of both creators and consumers to be blurred, right? So consumers can actually be creators as well. And I think that's an interesting way to go. I think there's challenges in a traditional way because of measurement to be necessarily be able to execute it in certain markets, but measurement really changes dramatically throughout the world, and our clients tend to be across the world in how they do things. So I think that's an interesting angle. And just quickly going back to the car thing as well, and I often see cars. We support clients in the in-flight entertainment system area, so backup seats on various aircraft. And that's a really interesting space for music and radio and how that's evolved as well. If you think back to where you used to take flights, the majority of consumption was actually a radio experience that you dialed a little number on your armrest to determine the radio station you were listening to. Whereas today, it evolved to where people were using radio music much less and going to the video component much more. We've been doing a lot of initiatives to actually say, how do you bring a lot of relevance back to radio? Because radio really fits in that environment. And the reason I say that is that I'd love to understand what Tommy and Jeremy think. If I project forward, I think the car environment's going to be a more passive environment where the driver as well can be engaged in different experiences that are happening on the entertainment system in the car. Self-drive is part of those reasons, right? Other automated systems that will come in. And so you have to start to really think, how do you actually engage these people? And for me, that's a really interesting similarity between those two markets.
Jeremy, Tommy, do you agree with what Con just said, or is he barking up the wrong tree?
No, I mean, I think all that stuff's inevitable. It's just a matter of when. Are we talking 10 years from now or 40? I have no idea. Um, but I think, I mean, there is, I want to just kind of stand up a little bit for audio for a moment. I mean, another thing I'm really highly involved in is the podcast industry. And there's a lot of talk in the podcast industry of like, well, maybe every podcast should be video because video seems to be where it's at. Like we should be making video. And yeah, okay, maybe, but also you could also argue that every video should have audio. But audio will always have a place. I don't care how good technology gets. Audio will always have a place. People will always want to multitask, right? People will always want to, I want to walk my dog and listen to audio. I want to drive my car and listen to audio. I want to exercise and listen to audio. Sometimes you can't be interacting and watching and doing other things. Sometimes you just want to be able to wash the dishes and listen to audio. I think audio, no matter what, no matter how good technology ever gets, audio will always, always have a place.
So Jeremy, you just talked about podcasting there for a moment, and
Yeah.
you have an intimate experience about podcasting from a former radio space to a podcast that worked really well. Can you just explain that story and what led that change and how successful has that been?
Well, we've got multiple stories. I assume you're talking about our sports network in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a local sports network that we've built in Minneapolis that has big audiences and makes real money revolving around just all the local teams here. And that was all born out of at one point it was an AM radio station, and it was an AM radio station that was struggling to get ratings on AM. And also in the market that we're in, there's a big FM sports station that's a behemoth. So it was always a struggle. And as we focused our efforts towards let's just be digital and let's produce podcasts and leaned into that, and eventually leaned really heavy into YouTube and just started producing content for online, we were able to build this thing out of this AM radio station that today is more successful than that AM radio station ever had a chance to be. I mean, back in its heyday, it made good money, but today, like it just wouldn't have a chance, right? So that's just one example of the opportunity that radio creators, like we have the ability to create out of what we have. And that's talent and personality and building on that to put this content online and build big audiences. There are audiences out there that they will only consume that way. They will only consume via podcast or via YouTube. And we've seen it work. Like Minneapolis is a great example, but we've got many other examples like that of building audience online.
Will podcasting ultimately kill radio?
No, no. I think, like I said earlier, that experience of consuming it all at once, I think if we can lean into that, make those live morning shows and afternoon shows and the content that we produce throughout the day, make that a community-driven experience. I mean, that's part of the magic of it. And I think we just need to continue to lean in, remind the audience, why that magic exists and why it works. And I think I don't no, I don't think podcast is the death of radio. I think podcast is just something that is born out of radio.
Yeah, well said.
It is, and yeah, most of the podcasts out there are already produced by radio stations and broadcasters and are extended one way or the other with the radio. But I wanna just go back to what Jeremy said with radio sticking to audio and audio being the prime source of both music but also entertainment, just the audio part. And I think you're touching upon something that I think is very important. Radio has been around for 100 years. It stayed strong, showed itself resilient by being true what radio actually is, and what we're talking about here, shared experience and trustworthy, and I think radio, that's what's gonna make sure that radio will survive any battle, if it's podcasts or whatever comes in the future. But our job from the technology side is to make sure that broadcasters and radio stations are enabled with tools to make that change in a visual way, in a different experience. So yeah, I think as you said, just need to make sure and embrace and uh, and get some, radio survived all the threats it's met, even if it's been TV or whatever it's been, by a lot of passion for radio and a lot of passion for how it sounds and the on-air personalities and whatnot. We need to add into the mix some passion for how radio looks and how it works on a screen, and how users interact with this as well.
Okay, I've got
I'm really interested to hear from some of the experts on this panel on terms of where you think there's been a lot spoken around, AI DJs and such, right? In what you're saying, which is really about authenticity, it's about trust, right? Where do you guys see that when it compares to technology trying, I guess, to save money at the end of the day by replacing talent with an AI?
Yeah, I think it's funny being a digital guy, some of the opinions I have on AI, but I mean, AI is going to have its place. I mean, AI, there's no question it helps us be more productive. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. There's great tools there to make you be more productive, make you be smarter about what you're doing, all that stuff. But we cannot fool ourselves into thinking that AI is going to replace personality. AI is not going to do a morning show, right? Could AI set up a song? Maybe. I've seen examples of that. I still think you're giving up that authenticity that we talk about. And I think that in a world of AI, like people, at some point, people are going to want human connection. They're not going to want all this robotic, perfectly created content. At some point, that becomes horribly boring. And another opportunity that we have is to just keep being authentic and human and real, and doing it the way we always have. I think experimenting with some of that stuff is fine, but let's keep it experimental. Right. We got to be really careful.
So we've got about 5 minutes before we're going to open it up to you who are sitting patiently at home asking some great questions. We've seen them come through. So we're going to pivot to you in a moment, but let's just continue leaning into this AI for a moment because Jeremy, you've kind of opened up a can of worms, answering Con's question there. Is there a place at all for AI on the radio? And if not, where should broadcasters be using AI? If you were to tell them you must use it here, where would that be?
I mean, I've seen great examples of like AI powered automation systems, things like that, things to make you smarter about scheduling music and helping the flow of programming a radio station. I think there's all kinds of there's place for all that stuff. I just again the place where it in my mind can't be is the voice that the listener hears. The voice that the listener hears, I just think it needs to be human. It needs to be authentic and real.
What about midnight to dawn when most radio stations just play back-to-back music? Surely you can have AI content, DJ'd content at that time of night for the people that are doing night shift. Surely, right?
I mean, that's what people love to tell you. I mean, I honestly, I'd rather just play music than have that. That's just me. I mean, I can't just asterisks on all this. I don't speak for all of radio. I'm just giving you my own opinions here. Um, but yeah, I mean, if there's any place to do it, that would be where to do it. I don't love it. I think there are people that consume overnight. There are people that work days and that's when they listen, is at night. Um, yeah, I wouldn't do it. That's just me.
Con,
I
you've
think
been
an interesting, I think an interesting area for that we've certainly been producing prototypes that are in market at the moment is around advertising. And so, one of the things that we often hear is that the opportunity for radio is to keep the broadcast experience, but to localize the advertising experience. And by doing that, lift revenue for that hyper-local type of connection. In our experiments, we've been generating audio ads on the fly within about 22 seconds of when they're actually required and then delivering them into the stream. And so you can start to actually think about hybrid solutions that are both digital and over the air, but actually deliver the advertising over the hybrid solution, which is over the IP solution, and for individual users and generate it in that way. Now, what's that mean in real terms? It means that you do need to use AI to understand the destination and the travel of someone if you do have that data, and then look at people that might want to participate in have already suggested they participate in advertising along that journey as an example. And so now you can hyper local target people knowing the journey that they're actually traveling. We think there's a real opportunity for better monetization through that, right? And hence being able to assist in that radio industry in that way. I think that's an interesting way that doesn't necessarily get into the authenticity piece, because people are perhaps more tolerant of an AI within a audio ad that sounds like a human in any case, than wanting a personality and an opinion, and you don't necessarily want an opinion from an AI.
And one thing we haven't touched upon with it, not directly linked to AI, but uh, it's the connected audience on connected devices means also one important other thing which broadcasters get empowered by, and that's data. You get a complete different set of data and understanding and insights from your audience going forward. You will fully understand, you will fully know what kind of songs what kind of songs make me turn off, what kind of songs make me volume up. We There's a complete different understanding of how audiences interact with radio stations and the content music on the stations with connected devices, and that's something to embrace for stations, for music industry, for anyone interested in making the radio experience even better for the audience.
Yeah,
that's good.
we've been leaning into that for about a decade at Hubbard. Like we have user registration and we collect data on people that consume us online. It's all like you don't have to register to listen, but it's an option, and we have prizes and things like that that encourage people to listen. But yeah, to me, I don't think, and I know this isn't a radio audience, but if we were talking to the radio industry, I don't think there's a more important mission for radio than to know who your customers are. Like, figure out who your customers are and what they like and what they don't like and when they listen and how long they listen. And that's a really, I think that's a really important mission, that some broadcasters are there. There's a lot that aren't. And I think that's a really good point.
Well, that's a great point to put a full stop after, and let's pivot to the questions from the audience. Before we do, Con, you've got a quick funny story to share about, and this is, I guess, a bit of a learning for us all as we innovate in our space. Sometimes some things get misinterpreted by the audience, such as the antennas that people were trying to attach to a device. You tell us about this, Con. What happened?
Well, it is a story that you just got to be careful where people are at from a technology perspective. Often, and I would imagine a lot of the people on that are listening to this panel, we're reasonable technologists. We understand technology reasonably well, but we're not necessarily true to the entire audience out there. And I think radio is a great example of being flattening the technology information that you need. In most cases, you can just press one button and it starts playing, right? Which is the simplest type of technology. But we were early on in terms of video over IP, and we were working with Samsung and created their platform, which was Music Hub. And their platform was delivering video clips that supported their audio application, and the video clips were delivered on TV, right? So you could have the TV experience. It was one of the early ones that you could do this for. And we also did customer support, and there were so many people that contacted customer support to understand how they would connect to the video service and which way did their antenna have to face to be able to connect to the video service, right? And so there was a total misunderstanding that it was IP, and we said, it really depends. You have to make sure you wear a certain tin hat to make that happen, right? And the rest of it. But it was a real learning to understand that you can't be in isolation talking about some of these technologies that we're talking about today. And, even when you think of AI, as we've been talking about for a certain amount, a short amount of time, it is, for some people, it's just too far and too way out. So you really do have to simplify the message and not think about the technology. How does the technology not get in the way? How do you actually enable it and create something really simple? And I think at its heart, that's what radio really excels at, right? In that way.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump to some questions that have been asked by our attendees for today. Maria, she makes a statement, but I'm going to turn it into a question. She said, radio has to deliver more music, less advertising. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, yeah. I think, just no, in the radio industry, not every company is the same, not every station is the same. Not everybody's approach to advertising is the same. So some stations are going to have more advertising than others. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we got to make a living, so that's why the ads exist. But yeah, there's definitely we got to find the right balance. Um, so yeah, I agree.
I would throw data and insights into that question or that comment, because in the future, again, knowing more about your audience, you will also serve them more relevant ads and make sure that the advertising isn't that provocative or misplaced as it might have been, or irrelevant as it has been for years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
I,
personally,
I, I agree with that. I think, like Jeremy said, you can't ignore that you actually have to have a monetization mechanism, or else you can't actually have the service. But if you can deliver more relevance, you may be able to deliver less frequency, right? Depending on the CPM that you get on the ad side.
I'm not against advertising personally. Someone who worked in the radio industry and the first half of my career was in commercial radio. I understand the importance of it from a monetary perspective, but I've just been consuming Nation Player in the UK over the last week. And I've been loving listening to the ad breaks of the stations in Scotland, Wales, and the UK. And what struck me, the difference between, obviously, I'm native to Australia, but currently living in America, but the Australian advertising is speaking at you, come down, come down, come down. it was a lot more conversational about what was going on, and it really enticed me to stick to the radio. I was listening to ads. So for me, my answer is it's not about less advertising. I think it's about more relevant advertising. That's the point that you guys have made as well. Okay, Andy has asked a great question. What are your takes on the trend of radio stations leaning more into making their DJs focus on being content creators, focused on funny clips, instead of community and music focused content?
Well, and from a clip standpoint, you got to realize why we're doing those things, and it's all about awareness. Like the social media game is all about awareness. We're trying to, continue to keep audience on radio, bring audience to radio, and when we're doing those things online, that's what we're doing. We're trying to reach people where they are. There are all kinds of people that consume via TikTok, turns out, and if we can tell them that our station exists where they live, that's the mission that we're constantly on, is trying to reach those people. Um, so yeah, I mean I don't know if that answers the question, but that's why we do those things, is to try to get people to tune in.
Tommy, do you see the same in Europe?
Yeah, well, from my not being from a specific broadcaster, I would say from our end, it's about making the technology available for broadcasters to actually play around and learn and do their own experience with how to make their content more visual and more engaging. And I think going forward, we will probably see a lot of different ways of doing that. It be short clips, be simulcasting, when it be, yeah, could be a lot of stuff. I think, and I think we see markets react a bit differently there. In some countries, Italy, for instance, hardly any stations is on air without also being broadcasted visually on a TV. They have their own TV shows, simulcasted with radio shows, and that's not done in any other market in Europe, but it works there. So I think maybe we'll see radio differ a bit more from market to market, but I think the overall tools and experiences should probably stay the same.
I call that clip strategy, when I talk about internally, is our free sample strategy. When you go to Costco and they're handing out free samples and you try that little piece of chicken sausage, you go, "Oh, this is good. I'm going to buy that." Right? That's essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to give out the free sample and then get people to come consume. The one thing that should be very obvious, maybe it's not, we don't make money on TikTok. We don't make money on Instagram Reels. We don't that's not a place that we really want to be consumed, because we can't monetize it. But we're giving out those free samples, and then we're trying to get people to the channels that we do monetize.
Yeah. I find an interesting shift happened in about 2012. At the same time that people meters came into the US market, US radio went more music. Simultaneously to that, in Australia, it went the opposite way. The Australian industry said it's not about the music moving forward, because it's about Spotify, and all our consumers are probably going to end up in that space. So they leaned right into that personality, and so I like the use of personality on radio, from a fact that it's a human connection, and then I see, you're right, Jeremy, it's just an extension of that to get it into the social platforms. I consume many radio shows now, not by listening to the radio, but by experiencing them on social media. I would never have said that 10 years ago. We got Erica, who's joined us from a radio station, KXRA in Portland. Thanks for joining us, Erica. She said, "What's the panel's take on internet radio?" NTS is a good example. Does it provide a model for internet without the car? And how does internet radio help us define radio?
I guess I'll be the dummy here. What is internet radio? I don't know what that is.
Um, I'm assuming she's saying radio stations that are not delivered via broadcast, so not simulcast stations, but online only radio stations. I'm assuming that's what she's meaning.
I think an interesting example of that, Jared, like in the Australian market here, is Southern Cross Stereo, and you sort of mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of their listener application having so many options for people to listen to stations that are not broadcast. So it works in this region and this environment where people can connect to either get the full, I'm going to call it the full radio experience with personalities, or connect to other experiences where they're still able to actually consume music or podcasts or other elements through those channels. So I think we've seen that work in this market, but one of the reasons is probably measurement's different as well. I'm going to assume it's quite different for Jeremy and in the US market.
Measurement.
Measurement and really the success of a hybrid model because of measurement, right? That you really have to almost double down on the measurement aspect rather than being able to actually have multiple channels on digital that might take measurement away from your core channel.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like I
Mhm.
said at the top, like there's definitely challenges around what Nielsen would say we have in the US versus what we see when we look at our streaming channels online, um, and trying to make those work together and get buyers to understand it and understand how to buy it is definitely a learning curve.
Yeah. But I sort of think measurements are key there globally to say if we can standardize how measurement actually works, right? Which is for me, is a better indicator of the success of a particular company rather than, hey, it's how I'm doing this one city in this one medium through this one type of distribution.
Hmm.
Okay, I've got one final question here before I come back and ask one of my own questions to wrap this whole session up. This one's from Melissa. She says, is podcasting today's version of the pre-television era entertainment programming?
What is that? What is pre-television era entertainment
I,
programming?
I,
Maybe
I'm
I
I'm
have to explain.
thinking radio serials. Like that's
Is
that
it,
we
yeah, I
don't.
was going to say, is it the stories? Is it the audio
Yeah,
books, for want of a better word?
to me, what podcasting is the digital version of talk radio. The difference with talk radio is it's live, and podcasting is the on-demand version of that. And that's something that a music radio station can't do. We can't have an on-demand music podcast because of obviously everything with music licensing and all that. But um, I mean that's what to me that's what podcasting is. It's the evolution of talk radio. I mean, you listen to most podcasts, and it's essentially just it is talk radio. It's just that's the form it's taken now, and we call it podcast.
You agree, Tommy?
Yeah, and again, as I said with podcasting, I think from a radio perspective, radio being the discovery engine above any, I think content discovery is about listening to radio station, listening to live radio, and then through a device on your dashboard or in your TV set or whatever you on your mobile phone, wherever you do it, the ability to discover based on what you listen to, it be artists, it be a podcast show from the same or the similar content you're listening to. I think radio listened on connected devices will give podcasts a new possibility to thrive, actually.
Mm. Okay, guys, it's been a great discussion. We're right on time. So let's finish off with this question where I want to hear from each of you. What's one practical thing that anyone listening to this right now can do tomorrow to improve their audience engagement, regardless of their industry?
Should I go first?
Yep.
For our core is making radio look good in the future, and then in connected cars especially. Check out how you look. Either you're a radio station, how do you actually look on screen? If you're a label in the music industry, how does your artists look on the radio? make sure that experience is something else than it used to be.
I think engagement breeds engagement. So I think if you engage with your audience, you're going to get them to engage back with you. If all you do is project out and you wait for response, you're going to have a harder time with engagement. And when they do engage with you, you need to engage back. That's like the entire definition of engagement. And I think a lot of times that's where engagement dies is either we're not engaging back or we're not engaging to start with. So that would be my answer. Since you said regardless of the industry, engagement breeds engagement.
Well said.
Yeah, my thing would be that it's all really about the data flywheel. So how do you actually get enough data in to actually start to make better decisions? I think there's a lot of tooling with AI and other elements that allows you to trawl through that data much more effectively than you once could, and it's much more accessible. But you need to have those pipelines to get that data in the first place so you can understand and the audience and provide relevancy to the audience. Whether that's more music, more voice, more whatever that's in that process.
And for me, it comes down to trust. I think the era that we're in at the moment, ChatGPT's only been here for 3 years. Can you believe that? But look how much it's changed. Look how much AI has changed over the last 3 years. If you look at Facebook at the moment, you scroll your social feeds. I don't know how much of your content is made up, but most of mine is now AI generated content. Halloween came past a few weeks ago, and I go, oh my goodness, look at that! And I almost fell for it. And then I realized, hang on a sec, America doesn't have kangaroos. And I realized that it was a kangaroo generated content for American audience that looked so darn real. And I almost believed it. And it was one of those light bulb moments for me that said, I think trust is the future, regardless of the industry you're in from a content perspective. So whether you're in podcasting, whether you're in radio, whether you're in social media, if you can be a trustworthy person in this era of made up content and distrust going through, I think people will look to you and you'll be able to succeed. Guys, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Tommy Goldstad from Radio Player, Jeremy Simon from Hubbard Radio, Con Rasso from Tune Global, and myself from The Audience Company. We thank you so much for attending today. We hope this has been an interesting discussion. We hope you've walked away with some thoughts that you didn't have coming into this. We hope you've been inspired, and wherever you are and whatever industry you're in, we wish you luck as you engage with your audiences for the future. Thanks so much.